Hi everyone, I'm currently in Maastricht at the BPB Limburg Open, a lovely tournament in the Netherlands with over 500 participants. I'll be doing the live commentary during the tournament, but I got some time to do some small report about the first round since I'm here anyway. So it's a nice tournament. There are quite some strong players. We have some strong international grandmasters like Sadler, Bauer, Sebastian Bogner, Alexander Fier. Together with some Dutch GMs like Sokolov, Ernst, Janssen and Pruijssers. Some very exciting chess players. They have such an amazing style, some open tournament players as well. So I expect a lot of action from these guys. And I just want to show you a few highlights from the first round. Not many unexpected results. But let me start with the top seed, Sadler, who is always in for an interesting game. So in this first game against Achim Wilde from Germany, I'll just walk you through the opening moves. It was quite a decent opening. With a different move order, we reached the slow Slav, which is a sideline in the semi-Slav basically. And this is quite common for white. He just grabs some space advantage, and also gets a hold of the bishop pair with knight takes g6. Now he just develops his pieces. So does black. And the position for black is quite solid. I've played this quite a few times with black myself, but I do know it can be quite difficult to find a good plan at some point. So white castles queenside, which is fine. The position is quite close, so there's not going to be any big action with opposite castled kings. And the queens are about to exchange anyway, so it's perfectly fine. A4, queen takes b6, knight takes b6. So white has a pair of bishops and decides to open up the position, which makes perfect sense. So he takes on d5. Knight takes. Knight d4 doesn't want to exchange the knights. A3, b3. Black has knight d7, rook c1. King f8, which might look a bit funny, but it's just a fine move. Rook f1, so white trying to target the black king immediately. King g8. Now white opens up with f4, which again makes perfect sense, because white has a pair of bishops and just wants to open up the position. Black takes on f4, e takes. Now the downside for white is that black gets a huge square on d5. I mean, look at the beautiful knight there. It's going to be pretty difficult to get to kick the knight away from d5. Anyway, black has bishop b4, decides to exchange the bishops. Bishop takes, knight takes, allowing knight d6, which looks pretty good for white. I mean, the knight is beautiful on d6, attacking the b7 pawn. And also, this guy is going to become a bit vulnerable with bishop on g2. Rook on c1, hitting this pawn. So it looks a bit scary for black, and he actually makes his first mistake, because up to this point he played an excellent game. Now he played rook a7, but I think the rook should be on b8. Because the rook on b8 at least defends the back rank, which might be important, because as we know, white really wants to open up the position anyway. And then it's all not so clear. White can still push with f5, the pawn takes, knight takes, and for example knight f6, followed by knight d5. Not sure which knight is better to d5, but any black knight to d5 is just fine. And black has a very solid position and a slightly better pawn structure maybe. And it's going to be quite difficult for white to create any good chances there. But instead, he didn't play rook b8, he went rook a7. That's a bit of a strange move. Now white still decided to open up the position with f5. He tried to close it with rook d1, and here he made his final mistake. But still his position is already worse, because the rook on a7 is just a bit silly. So he played f6, and after rook c4 he just resigned. Might seem a bit premature, but he just don't have any good squares for the knight basically. You can go knight a6 for example, but then rook a4, and not only the pawn here is hanging. Not only the pawn on a3 is hanging, but also knight takes b7 is a threat, because this one will remain unprotected if black takes back with the rook. So his position just collapsed all of a sudden, which is a bit unfortunate, but a nice game by Sadler anyway. So he won his first game relatively easy. Another player who was struggling a bit more was Sokolov, playing against Peter Wilschut. They at some point reached the position where this position, I will jump straight to this position, I must say black used quite a lot of time at this point already. White is up more than an hour on the clock, which is huge. And here once again white have the pair of bishops, so white is looking to open up the position. And the most logical way to open up would be b4. But the thing is, it's black to move here, and black actually decided to play e5, which is a big surprise in my opinion. Because black doesn't want to open up the position at all, he wants to keep it closed. But now he opens up the diagonal for the bishop on c3, which is surprising. Knight g4, and he's also losing a pawn, h3. Knight takes back on e5, but white just captured the pawn on e4, and white is up a pawn, got a pair of bishops. So it's looking pretty good for white all of a sudden, but for some reason the position just turns around and it comes back to equal again. So black goes f5, rook d1, queen e6. Now white decides to capture the knight on e5, and black doesn't take back on e5 but takes the bishop on e4, and that's actually quite clever. Because now we reach an opposite color bishop ending, and that has some drawing tendencies, but can also pretty unbalanced, and it's just in favor of the one who has the initiative. And but at least black is back in the game, I think. And after bishop f4, rook d8, the rooks went up the board, rook d1, and here black played a clever move, rook d3, which is a nice move. Now the rook is pretty annoying for white, so Sokolov decided to exchange the rook on d3, pawn takes, queen d2. And here black missed a very good opportunity, because he went queen d7, which is a bit slow. He's preparing b5. But the thing is, black has a temporary initiative. He just has this pawn on d3. And this one is huge. This one is keeping white tied up to the pawn. But if white manages to play f3 followed by e4, he can block the diagonal of the bishop, protecting the pawn, and he can try to win the d-pawn and make the bishop on g6 rather passive. So black needs to be quick. So instead of queen d7, he should have actually went for the immediate b5, which is much stronger. And now it's not so easy for white to find a good move, because if he goes for the f3 plan to block the bishop on g6, black is simply going to grab a pawn on c4, queen takes, and queen takes a4, queen takes d3, queen b5. And I mean, material is equal, but it is pretty unclear at this point, and I think black has excellent chances, just like white, by the way. But it's going to be difficult for one side to win the game here, so it looks pretty drawish to me. And after b5, if white decides to take the pawn on a5, black just takes on c4, pawn takes, and queen takes c4. And as you can see, white didn't have any time to play f3 and e4 yet. Also, white is black threatening to go queen c2 followed by d2, d1. And if white cannot just play this move, this a4, the e4 move, he needs to protect with f3, because else he's just dropping a pawn because bishop takes e4. So I get the feeling white is in some trouble here, because he might just not be in time to play e4 without dropping a pawn. But yeah, black missed his good opportunity, so he went queen d7, and white managed to play f3. He still played b5, but now it's a bit slow because white just goes e4. Black still takes on c4, but as we just saw, the queen was here in the previous position, and he could just capture the pawn on c4. And the queen is on d7, so he needs to spend another tempo. Then some pawns were exchanged, and eventually the white pawns appeared to be stronger, and black collapsed in time trouble. So it looked like a decent game from Sokolov, but I think black missed a chance here in the endgame. And but overall, it's a good victory. One final moment then is the only unexpected result on the live boards, which is between the game between Baltic, a German player, and Beersen, talented Dutch player. And the position just opened up all of a sudden after black decided to play the move d5 here, and white decided to open up the center as well, probably because he has his pieces are nicely positioned. And yeah, the rook on the e file and the queen on the e file looks promising for white, because the queen might always be in trouble when all the pawns get exchanged. So and that's just what happened. Black took on d4, knight takes d4, knight e5, takes on d5, takes on d5, f4, knight c4, bishop f2, now with tempo because the queen is attacked, queen d6, knight d6, knight takes b2. And here white got a little greedy in my opinion. He decided to just capture the rook on f8, rook takes and go queen c2, and he actually offered a draw here, which was happily accepted by the black player. Because white is just up the exchange for a pawn, but he is up in exchange. And he still has some play against the black king, I think, with some f5 ideas. So that was a bit surprising to me. But instead of capturing the rook on f8, I think the knight on e6 is much stronger at this point. So he could have better played queen c2 here, forcing knight c4, and now play f5. And suddenly black is in a lot of trouble because it's pretty difficult for him to defend against all the threats against the black king. For example, if he wants to remove his rook and protect the g6 pawn, you can just capture the pawn on g6. And if rook takes, you can go knight f5, for example, simply double attacking the queen on d6 and the bishop on g7. And yeah, that's just going to win material for white. So he doesn't really have a good move. He can go, for example, knight to e5 to protect g6, pawn takes, can move the king, and now we see how material is not always important. You would expect white to maybe capture the rook on f8, but he could capture the bishop on g7, which is an even more important piece. King takes and bishop d4, and as you can see, white is developing this overwhelming initiative against the black king. So white missed some good opportunities in this game. Still, I mean, a draw against 24-58 is not a bad result for him, but he had some more chances there, so oh well. So some other top players also had a struggle, but they all managed to win their games. So not too many unexpected results in the first round. Second round is on the way at the moment, and I hope I'll be able to give you another update after this day. But I played 2 rounds today, total of 7 rounds. Yesterday only 1 round, of course, because it was the first day, so we started in the evening. And I expect so many more interesting games. So if you want to follow the action, make sure to visit the website. You can check the games at limburgopen.nl, or you can go to Play Chess or Chessbomb or any website that covers these games. So thank you for watching, and hopefully you can get many more games to enjoy.